They tell you it was a myth, a morality tale invented by a philosopher to make a point. They tell you Atlantis never existed, and for the most part, they're right, at least officially. But what if the story isn't about a sunken city, but a buried technology? A power so profound, it could rewrite not just our future, but our past. What if the proof is hidden in plain sight, in the very texts they use to dismiss it? What if that discovery could get you hunted? They don't want you to know what was lost. More importantly, they don't want you to know what could be found again. The story of Atlantis has captivated imaginations for over 2,000 years. It's a tantalizing whisper from the ancient world, speaking of a magnificent island civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single, terrible day and night. For most of history, and certainly today, the academic world has filed this story under fiction. The mainstream consensus is clear. Atlantis is an allegory created by the Greek philosopher Plato. It's a thought experiment about a perfect society corrupted by power. There is no credible archaeological evidence, no historical record outside of Plato's own dialogues to support its existence as a real physical place. And yet, the story endures. It refuses to die. Why? Is it just a romantic fantasy, or is it something more? A persistent cultural memory, an echo of a forgotten truth so deeply embedded in our collective mind that we can't let it go. This is a story about a different way of seeing things. It follows the path of a hypothetical researcher. Let's call him Dr. Alistair Finch, a classicist who dares to ask a forbidden question. What if Plato wasn't writing an allegory, but was instead concealing a dangerous history inside a philosophical lesson? This path would cost a person their reputation and career, because this theory suggests that an ancient order, let's call them the custodians, has been working for millennia to suppress this knowledge, to keep humanity from rediscovering the awesome and terrifying power that brought a lost civilization to its knees. This is the story of that investigation, a journey into forbidden texts, mysterious ruins, and a forgotten science. This is the forbidden technology of Atlantis. They don't teach you the code in the Critias. The investigation begins where the story was born, in Plato's writings. Around 360 BC, the philosopher wrote two dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, that introduced the world to Atlantis. The story is framed as a history passed down from the lawgiver Solon, who supposedly heard it from Egyptian priests. The orthodox view is that Plato invented the narrative. His fictional Atlantis, a naval power beyond the Pillars of Hercules, tries to invade Athens, but is repelled by the virtuous Athenian state. The gods then punish Atlantis for its hubris with earthquakes and floods, sinking it into the sea. A simple cautionary tale. But fringe theorists believe this was a brilliant misdirection. Maybe Plato was living in a time where challenging established beliefs was dangerous, so he disguised a real history as fiction. The first clue for these theorists is the strange specificity of the details. Plato provides dimensions, social structures, and most importantly, a date. He says the war and cataclysm took place 9,000 years before his time. Solon lived around 600 BC, which gives us a date of roughly 9600 BC. For centuries, this date was considered proof of fiction. Mainstream history teaches that in 9600 BC, humanity consisted of primitive hunter-gatherer societies. A superpower like Atlantis would have been impossible, but for those who believe, this impossible date is the key. They ask a question most refuse to entertain. What if something of global significance did happen around 9600 BC? As it turns out, that date coincides almost perfectly with one of the most significant moments in modern climate science, the end of the Younger Dryas. This was a period of catastrophic climate change where, after millennia of warming, The planet was suddenly plunged back into near glacial conditions. Then, just as suddenly, around 9600 BC, it ended. The climate warmed dramatically, ice sheets melted, and sea levels rose by hundreds of feet, flooding coastal areas across the globe. A compelling, though fringe theory suggests this was all triggered by a comet impact. This world-altering cataclysm happened right when Plato said, Atlantis disappeared. For believers, the date isn't a flaw in the story. It's a stunning clue. Perhaps Plato wasn't describing a localized earthquake. Maybe he was documenting the end of a world. The ghost masons of Göbekli Tepe. If a global cataclysm happened around 9600 BC, what would any survivors do? They would carry memories of their lost world, its science, its beliefs. They would try to rebuild, or at least leave a message for the future. A warning. For decades, this was pure speculation. There was no archaeological proof of any advanced construction from that time, until 1994. In southeastern Turkey, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began excavating a hill called Göbekli Tepe, or Potbelly Hill. What he uncovered would shatter our understanding of the ancient past. Göbekli Tepe is a massive temple complex of intricately carved megalithic pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons. The carvings are stunning. The pillars are arranged in large, sophisticated circles. It is, without a doubt, one of the most astonishing archaeological sites on Earth. Mainstream archaeology attributes its construction to local hunter-gatherer societies, a mind-boggling feat for people who supposedly hadn't yet developed agriculture or permanent villages. But the most shocking fact about Göbekli Tepe is its age. Radiocarbon dating places its construction right around 9600 BC, the exact date Plato gave for the end of Atlantis. For fringe theorists, this can't be a coincidence. It's the smoking gun. How could nomadic hunter-gatherers, struggling after a global cataclysm, suddenly organize to create the world's first known temple? The orthodox explanation feels incomplete to some. The alternative theory is radical. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built by local hunter-gatherers. It was built with them by a small group of outsiders, survivors, the ghost masons of a lost world. This theory suggests that these survivors brought sophisticated knowledge of engineering and astronomy and organized the locals to build a monument, a library in stone designed to pass on their knowledge and warn of the cataclysm that destroyed their world. Then there's another mystery. After about 500 years, the entire complex at Göbekli Tepe was deliberately and carefully buried under a man-made hill. Why? The mainstream has no definitive answer, but in the alternative view, it was the ultimate act of preservation. The survivors knew their knowledge was dangerous. They built a marker for a future humanity to find, and then they hid it, protecting the world from the knowledge itself. This idea that the knowledge wasn't just lost, but forbidden, is central to the mystery. The search for a physical trace. Göbekli Tepe provided a powerful link to the right time period, but Plato described an island nation. If it were real, there would have to be physical evidence, submerged ruins. This is where the story turns to one of the most controversial pieces of potential evidence, a submerged structure off the coast of the Bahamas, known as the Bimini Road. The story is tied to the American psychic Edgar Cayce. In the 1930s and 40s, Cayce, the sleeping prophet, spoke at length about Atlantis in his trances. He claimed it was located near Bimini and made a specific prediction that evidence of Atlantis would rise from the sea in 1968 or 1969. Right on cue, in 1968, divers discovered a J-shaped formation of large, flat limestone blocks stretching for half a mile under the water. It looked for all the world like a road or the foundation of a wall. However, the scientific community quickly offered a different explanation. Geologists concluded that it was a natural phenomenon called beach rock, where sediment can fracture in straight lines and right angles, mimicking man-made blocks. The mainstream consensus today remains firm. The Bimini Road is a fascinating but entirely natural formation. Case closed, not for those who want to believe. They point to persistent controversies. Some researchers who've studied the site for decades insist it has features inconsistent with natural processes, like what appear to be deliberately placed prop stones under some of the larger slabs. The Bimini Road is a geological Rorschach test. If you believe history is settled, you see beach rock. But if you believe we're a species with amnesia, you see the potential ghost of a forgotten shoreline. You see a place where a myth could have touched the real world, rediscovering the power of the gods. What was this forbidden technology? Plato gives only a hint, describing a mysterious metal called orichalcum, which he said was second only to gold in value. To explore this lost science, we have to step into the world of esoteric texts and psychic revelations using the same man who pointed to Bimini, Edgar Cayce. Cayce's readings described a civilization powered not by fossil fuels, but by an understanding of universal forces. According to Cayce, the Atlanteans built what he called a great crystal, or Tuaoi stone. This device acted as a central power station, gathering solar and terrestrial energies and broadcasting them wirelessly to power the entire civilization. He described flying machines that operated on principles of resonance and anti-gravity. It sounds like pure science fiction. But some see a parallel in the work of one of history's greatest scientific minds, Nikola Tesla. At the turn of the 20th century, Tesla was working on a system for the wireless transmission of power on a global scale at his Wardenclyffe Tower. He believed he could pump electrical energy into the Earth itself and then draw it out anywhere in the world, providing limitless free energy for all. His chief financial backer, J.P. Morgan, realized that if you can't put a meter on it, you can't charge for it. Funding was pulled and Tesla's vision was suppressed. The theory doesn't suggest Tesla found an Atlantean schematic. It suggests something more profound, that Tesla independently rediscovered the same universal principles the Atlanteans had supposedly mastered 12,000 years earlier. Both recognized that the universe is a sea of vibrating energy, and you could argue both were victims of a power structure that benefits from the status quo. The global grid and the music of the spheres. This alternative theory then gets even more ambitious, proposing the existence of a prehistoric planetary energy grid. This is an idea popular in fringe circles, which posits that the great megalithic sites of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, were not isolated tombs or temples. They were nodes in a global network, placed on energetic ley lines to tap into the planet's electromagnetic field. Theorists point to the strange acoustic properties of many of these sites. The King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, for example, resonates at a specific frequency. Was this by design? This theory proposes that the Atlantean survivors taught early civilizations a safer version of their old technology. They taught them how to build resonant stone structures, not as power plants, but as tuning forks to harmonize the Earth's energy field. In this view, the Great Pyramid wasn't a tomb, it was a harmonic resonator. Stonehenge wasn't just a calendar, it was an energy regulator. This, the theory claims, was the true purpose of orichalcum. It wasn't just decoration. Perhaps it was a naturally occurring superconductor or a material with unique resonant properties, essential for tuning the crystals and focusing the energy. This music of the spheres, made manifest in stone, was the great secret of the ancient world. But it was only a shadow of the power Atlantis had once wielded. The revelation, the consciousness, catastrophe. Why would this knowledge be so obsessively suppressed for millennia by the secret custodians of this theory? The suppression of free energy is a powerful motive, but it doesn't feel big enough. The final part of the theory is this. The Atlantean crystal grid was not primarily a power source for machines. It was a consciousness-amplifying network. It was designed to link the minds of the populace, to enhance their psychic and intellectual abilities, a technological path to enlightenment. But as their power grew, so did their hubris. According to Casey's readings, a faction of Atlanteans began to misuse the crystal's power for control and domination. This, the theory goes, was the real cause of the fall. By overtuning the global crystal network with negative intent, the Atlanteans created a devastating psychic feedback loop that warped the fabric of physical reality itself. The cataclysm was a psychic implosion that manifested physically. They didn't just misuse a power source, they weaponized consciousness itself and turned it on themselves. This is the forbidden secret, the reason for the custodians. The knowledge is suppressed not because it would give us free energy, but because it would give us the power of gods without the wisdom. To rebuild it today would be to risk the same self-destruction, but this time on a planetary scale. In the story of this theory, our researcher, Dr. Finch, knows the custodians are closing in, but he's not found in some ancient ruin. He's in a small, anonymous apartment. There's no dramatic chase. When they open the door, they find him at a desk. He has spent the last 48 hours compiling all his research, his notes on Plato, his analysis of Göbekli Tepe, his theories on the Bimini Road and Tesla, and his final terrifying conclusion. He hasn't sent it to a newspaper. He has uploaded it to the open source web, shattered into 1,000 pieces and scattered across countless servers and forums. He hasn't tried to preserve an answer. He has preserved the question. As they lead him away, a single document is left open on his screen. It's titled, "A Warning from the Past, a Choice for the Future." His work no longer belongs to him. It belongs to the world. This story, a mix of fact, fiction, and fringe theory, forces us to look at our own world differently. It suggests the line between myth and history is thinner than we think. The ideas have been scattered online, debated in forums, and dismissed by the mainstream, but the questions refuse to go away. Do ancient myths contain echoes of forgotten truths? What do you think the great megalithic sites of the world were truly for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The conversation is the first step. So where does this leave us? Do we accept the mainstream account that Atlantis was a fiction, a philosopher's fancy? Or do we entertain the unsettling possibility that this grand, overarching theory holds a kernel of truth? That we are living among the ruins of a forgotten world, and that our own history contains a warning we have yet to heed? The evidence remains circumstantial, a collection of anomalies and coincidences. There is no definitive proof, no piece of orichalcum we can hold in our hands. There is only the sheer persistence of the myth itself and the strange alignment of dates and discoveries that point towards a lost chapter in the human story. Perhaps the true forbidden technology was never about crystals or flying machines. Perhaps it was the understanding that consciousness itself is a force of nature, as powerful and dangerous as gravity, a force that can build utopias, and one that can tear reality apart. The final message isn't one of despair, but of choice. The knowledge, if it ever existed, might not be lost forever. It might be dormant, waiting in the resonance of ancient stones and within the untapped potential of our own minds. The question isn't whether we can rediscover this power. The question is whether we will have the wisdom to use it correctly when we do. The search for Atlantis is, and has always been, a search for ourselves. And that investigation is far from over.